Good morning. This morning we continue our study in the book of Proverbs. During the COVID crisis, we've been doing our Sunday school lessons online. Dr. Steeker taught for several months, and I know that you were blessed through his teachings as I was. Last week, Brother Scott did a lesson, did a great job. We've been blessed at Pleasant Grove Baptist to have some very good, learned teachers. But this morning, you've got me. So last week's lesson was out of Proverbs 8. Today's lesson starts in Proverbs 14. Now, Proverbs 10 through 13 is very good. Solomon begins a series of short sayings with his son, comparing a wise, hard-working, righteous man to a foolish, lazy, wicked person, and how each person reaps what they sow. So I really encourage you to spend time in chapters 10 through 13. There's some great lessons in there. Chapter 10 starts out, a wise son brings joy to his father, but a foolish son grief to his mother. There's just so many gems in here that I wish we had more time to go through them and discuss everything that's in there, but we don't. So now in today's lesson we're going to cover 4 different topics. They are prudence, content, joyfulness, and thriving. And the first verse we're going to study is verse 8 out of chapter 14. Verse 8 out of 14 says, "The sensible person's wisdom is to consider his way, but the stupidity of fools deceive them." So this verse tells us to apply godly wisdom by being prudent. Now, there's 3 different words that we really need to have a good understanding of. Knowledge, wisdom, and prudence. Knowledge is what we know. You can get that knowledge through books, through discussion, through experience. Wisdom is to know how to apply that knowledge. And prudence is how to study a problem or a situation to make the best choice, the best decision. Prudence involves thinking through the challenge and carefully considering all aspects of it before drawing a conclusion. Such a person from the text is deemed sensible. A foolish person doesn't take the time or make the effort to make a good decision. This person, and you see them all the time, they just kind of bounce through life from one issue to another with no apparent direction, but they just bounce through life from one thing to another. It doesn't take long before their lack of prudence reveals their stupidity. Okay, the next text is verse 15, which says, "The inexperienced one believes anything, but the sensible one watches his steps." This is so relevant today. It's amazing. Okay, so this says that a simple man, or the inexperienced man, will believe anything. He's subject to being tossed back and forth between opposing views and changes his mind like the wind changes. And you know, you'll hear somebody talk and explain what they believe, and I know I just kind of sit back and I think, you know, you really believe that? I mean, you really think that's true? So sometimes it's pretty amazing what some people will believe. In contrast, the prudent person or the wise person will consider what he'll do. He'll look at a situation, look at the pros, the cons, And as Christians, we need to bring problems to Jesus. He is there to help us. We are of Him. He is there. He said He'll be with us always. We need to consider what problem we're looking at, and then we need to ask for His direction in a solution. And we need to have the wisdom to follow His leading. We need to have reasons for doing what we do. And it shouldn't be because it's the popular thing to do. It's what everybody else is doing. We need to have a direction in this life. And our direction will lead to eternity with Christ. So, our next topic is content. It starts in chapter 14, verse 9. Verse 9 says, "Fools mock at making reparation, but there is goodwill among the upright." Okay, now, people in the days of Solomon took seriously the restoration of someone who had been treated wrongly. If someone lied to a person, stole, cheated, they should expect to make restitution to that victim. Solomon said that fools wouldn't take restitution seriously and would even detest it. They would ridicule the law, even mocking it. In contrast, God's people would respond totally different. They would strive to be upright. God's wisdom had guided them to make restitution and therefore maintaining relationships with others. When you lie to someone, when you steal from them, when you cheat somebody, that relationship is gone. That relationship of any trust is broken, and you're not going to be able to reach that person. So we need to act uprightly. We're ambassadors of Christ. We represent His kingdom to this world. And we need to take that. It's a very high challenge. It's a very high calling. Okay, the next text is verse 14. 14 says, "The disloyal one will get what his conduct deserves, and a good one what his deeds deserve." Okay, now the quarterly tells us that the Hebrew term for disloyal one is a picture of somebody going one direction and they decide to turn back. And we get the word backslide from the same term. Some people begin as loyal followers and then they fall away. When the going gets tough, they take off. This really reminds me of the parable of the soils, the 4 different soils of Matthew 13. Some seed fell on the path, was quickly eaten by the birds. Some soil fell, some seeds fell on the rocky soil. They sprouted but quickly died because they had no root. And this idea of being backslider reminds me of the rocky soil, that they start off good, they look good, but when things get hard, when things get rough, they take off. Now, in contrast, the good one will continue their walk with Jesus, which produces good deeds through their life. God has ordained a lot of things for us to do, and by us being obedient, we will do those deeds. Others will be drawn to Jesus through what we do. We cannot be good of and on our own. We cannot earn our salvation. Salvation comes through the cross. And without the cross, there's no salvation. we need to follow as Jesus leads. Okay, the next section we're going to cover covers joyfulness. And that starts in verse 10. The heart knows its own bitterness, and no outsider shares in its joy. Okay, now the heart, to a Jewish mind, was the center of feelings and emotions. This verse says that our hearts can never reveal the true depth of any bitterness that may be there. Now, people can empathize with someone who is hurting. We can empathize, they can empathize with us. But they cannot truly understand the depth of a person's bitterness, of their pain that may be in their soul. Likewise, no one can experience all the joy that our own heart may feel. Happiness is not joy. Happiness depends on situations, circumstances. Joy is deeper than happiness. Joy doesn't depend on current circumstances, current situations, like happiness does. Happiness comes and goes. Happiness, you can be happy one second and lose that happiness the next. Joy is something, it's a foundation that we build upon. Somebody without a relationship with Christ can't understand the joy that believers have because of that relationship we have. We can tell them of this relationship with Jesus, but joy can't be fully understood until they have their own relationship with Christ. Okay, then verse 13. And this lesson just jumps all over the place. It's I don't think there's any two verses back to back. That's the way it was written. Okay, verse 13 says, even in laughter, the heart may be sad, and joy may end in grief. So I think we all know of comedians that seem to have the world at their beck and call. Let's see. And people laugh for a lot of different reasons. They may laugh because of a joke, a picture, a funny situation. They may laugh because of a surprise. But laughter can also cover up a heart that is hurting, that is sad. And like the comedians I referred to a minute ago, some of the comedians that seem to be on top of the world carry some of the heaviest burdens that they're covering up with this happiness, with this laughter. Our joy comes from our relationship with God through the cross. Death and grief await us all. We're all going to die. But those who have a personal relationship with Christ will be with Him forever. We'll experience happiness and joy forever. Okay, now we're coming to the section that deals with thriving. It starts in chapter 14, verse 11. The house of the wicked will be destroyed, but the tent of the upright will flourish. Okay, now we come to the text that shows the results of being wise or being foolish. The person who lives for himself, seeking all the toys he can get in this world and ignoring God, will experience destruction. He may seem to be on top of the world for a while, but sooner or later it's all going to go away. There was a saying a few years ago, the guy with the most toys wins. Well, no, the guy with the most toys has the most stuff, and stuff should not bring total joy, should not bring happiness. So the person who goes for all the toys will end up in destruction. The wicked of verse 11 live in houses, but the upright live in tents. Now, normally, there's really no comparison between a house and a tent. A house is much more secure, it's much safer than a tent. But when you're abiding with God, He will make your tent more secure than any structure. When we follow God's wisdom and ways, He will cause us to flourish, whatever our circumstances might be. If He's with us, if we're with Him, we're going to succeed. Whether it looks like success to the world or not, God knows more than the world, and we will succeed. Jesus promised to be with us always. We can bring any petition to Him, and He'll receive it. Okay, the last text for today is verse 12. There is a way that seems right to a person, is the way to death. Okay, now all of us, each person, chooses a path that they'll take through different situations and through life itself. Without God's wisdom, without seeking His ways before our own, we're left to make choices based on our experiences, on knowledge, on opinion, on values, on circumstances. Obviously, God's ways are superior to ours. He knows the beginning from the end. He knows, He knew 3,000 years ago everything about us. He knows when we took our first breath, when we'll take our last. He knows what we're going to do 5 seconds from now. People who choose their own path may seem to prosper for a while, but eventually their castle is going to collapse, and their ultimate destination is separation from God, eternal separation from God. Okay, so why would a person reject the leading of an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-loving Creator and settle on a plan that will lead to destruction? They're either ignorant, they just don't know where their plan is taking them, or they have too much pride to relinquish the control of their life to Christ. Only a foolish person would reject the wisdom and the leading of God. But people do it every day. We live in a lost and dying world who needs to experience a relationship with their Creator. Our work as Christians is set before us. With God's leading, we will succeed. There is much work to do. The harvest is ready. We need to go out, make disciples of men. There's so much to do, and we don't know how much time is left. So we need to get busy. We need to go to work. We need to spread the gospel of Christ, that He would be glorified through our lives. That concludes the lesson for today. I hope you all have a good week, and I look forward to hearing what Brother John has in the message this morning. Thank you very much.